Alright, so I am going to be going over everything you need to know about Into the Mountains in this video. So this is the second level of Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's typically played as the second level of any percent, and after a very long cutscene you spawn in this room. Now, normally at the end of the first level, you will drop out player 2 as part of the process of getting 0 studs. So when you spawn into the level, you'll have Indy on player 1 and Marion on player 2 dropped out. But you're going to want to use Marion right away, so as soon as you spawn in, you're going to want to drop in player 2 and run over here to this ladder. Now, as soon as Marion hits this ladder, that's the end of the objectives you need to use Marion for here, since that'll drop the key onto the ground. And what Indy is going to do is he's going to whip that key close to him. So if you see kind of near where Indy is standing, and I'll get my cursor up so you can see this, right about here, there's a line on the floor. That is kind of the spot I use. If I'm a little past that line, then I'll be within the whip range for the key. Behind the line, I just barely have enough whip, but if I'm that far behind, I won't. So I try and put myself right around on that line on the floor when I whip the key. And when you do that, you can't start moving right away. If you do, you're actually going to run away from the key. So actually, if you whip towards him like that, that won't be a problem. But if you get the normal whip animation that doesn't move you forward and start running right away, it'll actually come out of your hands and just fly away from you. So you don't want to do that. You don't want to move until you have the key in your hand. Now, sometimes people, I've seen them build this piano instead with player 2. I don't do that personally. Normally, the reason people do that is just so that Indy won't accidentally start building if they press B early here, like if he does this. So that doesn't happen. That's why they do that. It's not something that's required. If it's helpful to you, feel free to do that. I personally prefer to just focus on player 1. Just on one player here, since that's the only thing that really matters. But that is an option for something that you're able to do if you want to. So after doing that, Indy's going to head over to here, and we have a little piece of tech where you can spin a key faster. So you're going to press the B button, and he's going to have the key out when he gets here, like this. Press the B button to put it in, and then press it once to grab the key. Now at this point, if you twirl the stick, it goes quite a bit faster inserting the key than if you don't do that. And you'll see that here in a second. If I don't do that, and that's a great example right there of what happens if you run away too early. If you don't do that, the key turns quite a bit slower. It probably saves almost a full second to do it like that. So that's the first section of the level right there. Now, as soon as the second part of the level, once the boss spawns and starts, Indy and Marion will always be in this location right here. And you want them to head over here, because that's where the boss is heading. He's heading right here. Now, Indy's job here is to attack the boss and get him down to 1 heart. So he's going to beeline right for where the boss is going to be, right over here. Punch him 3 times. And that's his main goal. That's the bottleneck for this first section. And while he's doing that, Marion is going to head over off screen to the right here, towards the bar. Alright, so we'll do that here briefly. Now, Indy gets his 3 hits in, and now Marion is standing in front of the bar, and there's actually a brown box thing on the bar right here. Now, I like to punch this during this downtime with Marion. You don't have to do this, but I like to do this because in the second phase of this fight, you can sometimes accidentally target this with one of the throwable objects. So you punch this right now. There's nothing in your path here that could potentially block a throwable object throw. So getting that out of the way just helps with targeting after this. And once she does that, Indy will take care of this guy behind him, and Marion will take care of this guy behind him, and that'll get rid of all the enemies, since we have to wait a bit for the boss to run through this door, come out this door, and hit the spot over here on the floor before he can be attacked again. Alright, so we'll go ahead and do that real quick. And now in the meantime, Indy is going to pick up a bottle right here. And while he's doing that, Marion's heading over to deal with the boss. So we'll go ahead and do this all again. You'll see the players are running to their respective destinations. Indy gets the boss, Marion gets the box, both enemies are killed, bottles grabbed. And now at this point, we still have a lot of time before the boss gets here. I like to get rid of this table on the right with Marion since I have some time to do that. And then I go over and get rid of the boss there. The good news about this route is that if you play this room like this, you can get the exact same times every single time. There's almost no variance at all in this boss fight, which is very useful. So Marion runs over, hits this table, and then right about here, the boss is still invulnerable, but a couple steps after where he is right here, he's going to become able to be hit. And the goal is to have Marion ready to hit him when he does that. And doing so will trigger the fight right, or the cutscene right away. Now, after this, we have the second phase of the boss fight with the enemy Sherpa here. Now, we have to throw 3 different objects at him. We already have the one object that Indy grabbed during the last phase. We have to get 2 more. So, because Indy has this object, and he's going to be the first one to throw it, he's going to get the second object. Because of that, he is the bottleneck of this section. It doesn't really matter how fast we're going with Marion, since Indy has to throw 2 objects and she only has to throw 1. So Marion is going to run over and pick up this chair right here, the closest one to her. Indy is going to go forward and throw his bottle at the Sherpa. Now, an important thing to note about throwing objects is that the targeting can be a little tricky if you're not doing it correctly. The important thing you want to do is you want to visualize a line between your character and the enemy that you're trying to target. And follow that exact line, and then when you see the target show up on them, you press the button to throw just a hair after that, while you're following that line. If you're walking in the direction of what you're trying to hit, and you see the target on them, you'll always target them every single time. There's no variance. So if you ensure that that is the case, you'll never miss shots here. You'll always land them on them. So, like I said, Indy is throwing his bottle, and in the meantime, Marion's grabbing the chair, and then Indy's going to run to the left, and he's going to get a chair that's just off screen to the left over here. And that's how this works. Now let's go ahead and do that. Indy throws bottle, Marion picks up chair, Marion throws chair, Indy throws chair. Now, that'll happen really fast, but you see that the speed that Marion went doesn't really matter because Indy is the bottleneck. So at this point, after the Sherpa gets hit by this third chair, he's going to jump out in front of the bar. And when that's happening, Indy is going to run over to this door in that direction, since the third phase is going to start as soon as this guy dies. And this is the door that the next boss comes out of. While he's doing that, Marion is going to run right up to the Sherpa and start punching him. And if you look at my input display, you want to be running directly at him, so you're going straight forward and then start spamming attack at him. So when she does that, she's going to intentionally kill herself, and I'm going to go ahead and do all that again because that was a little bit scuffed. But she is going to go and punch into the bar and intentionally die. And what that's going to do is that's going to give a little bit of extra time for Indy to get all his punches in on the boss. Now, if you're doing that correctly and without pausing the game to explain what you're doing like I am, you should be able to consistently hit that shot, or hit the 3 attacks on the next boss and kill him during the cutscene, so you don't have to wait until after it. So let's see that in action right here. Just like that. Now, if for whatever reason you miss one of those or 2 of those hits, you still should be able to kill the boss immediately after without having him run away. So if you do miss one of those hits on the boss and he stays alive, you can just kill him right after the cutscene. Now, right after this cutscene ends, we're going to be put into this part of the level. And the first thing you're going to do is you're going to jump roll with Indy and then drop out with player 2. Now, I'm actually going to look at that one more time because there's actually a couple things going on here. It's not very flashy, but it is important. So Indy jumps forward, and then you'll notice that I press another jump input afterwards. So you can also buffer it, hold it down. That works too. It's important to do that last jump input whenever you're doing a dive roll onto ground, because at least with Indiana Jones, doing an extra input at the end of a dive roll like that will cancel the last fraction of a second of his dive roll, which saves a very small amount of time, but it is free time save to do that. So anytime you're going to dive roll onto the ground, you should be buffering a jump so you jump immediately afterwards. And that saves like 0.2 seconds. But like I said, it's a free 0.2 seconds. There's no reason not to do it. So do that. And then as soon as you get about past here, then you're going to be able to pause. It's about here when you're past this wheelbarrow. That's when you're able to pause to drop out. So because of the camera pane, you're not able to drop out right away. But we don't need player 2 anymore, so we want to drop them out. So next we have generator 1 skip. Now, generator 1 is the first proper skip of this level, but it's also not very difficult, at least in its current iteration. So the goal here is to jump off of this generator, hit the black pole just barely so that you go into the slotting animation, but also get pushed up, and it'll push you up into the bar. So it's a little easy to mess up. It's not that difficult, but small changes in when you jump make it harder to land correctly. So depending on when you jump, if you jump a little early, like this, you'll go completely over the pole and miss it entirely. Now, if you jump late, like this, later than that, like this, your legs will hit the pole a little too hard. And it, sometimes when you intentionally try and go late, you don't end up missing it. But if you go a little late, your legs will hit the pole and you won't get enough height. Now, we're talking about late and early. I'm mostly referring to if you look right by my feet here, there's a little circle on the generator, and I like to use that as my visual cue of when to jump. You should be jumping when you're about fully on top of it, like this. So as soon as you get fully on top of it, that's when you press the jump button. If you wait too much after that, like that, you're gonna completely miss, or you're gonna just slam into the collision, not get any push up. If you jump too early, you're gonna completely miss the collision and get no push up. So you want to do it right when you're on top of the collision. It also matters the angle that you're holding. You need to be holding mostly to the right, and a little bit up is helpful. I think I hold mostly right, though a little bit up can't hurt as well, because that'll get you closer to the bar. But that's how you do generator 1. This skip does save a solid 15 seconds. It's definitely worth learning. The other alternative to this strat is just playing the level casually with 1P2C, and it's pretty annoying since all these enemies show up. Dealing with them is pain. So I definitely recommend doing this trick, even if it's hard for you, even if you're not saving time with it. Genuinely, it is something that's good to get good at. And it's also really easy to do multiple times. So if you're not getting it first try every time, it's not even that big of a deal, since any missed attempt doesn't really lose that much time. It's only about a second to set it up again. Even if you're missing it a ton like this, still set it up very quickly. Okay, so now that we're on the bar, we want to be moving to the right, but with bars, you don't want to be standing on them for very long, since moving on a bar is very slow if you're just shimmying along. You want to be repeatedly jumping off, and specifically jump rolling off. That's the fastest way to move. So you want to be doing this, and you can mostly just be pressing A fast or spamming it while you do that. And that not only gives you a jump roll, which is very slightly faster than a normal jump by a frame, but it also means that you're minimizing the time that you actually spend on the bar. Since if you're spamming the jump, you're going to get a jump off as soon as possible when you land back on the bar. So for crossing bars, and basically whenever you're touching bars in this game, you want to be doing something like that. You can also try and time them if you have a good idea of when you're going to be grabbing the bar, but that's a little bit harder. In any case, the main movement off this bar, you grab it over here, and you should be doing 1 jump roll, 2 jump roll, single jump. That lands you right here. And that last single jump, you'll need to kind of loop out a little bit. When you start right here, You might barely grab the end of this if you don't loop out a little bit. And there's also a bit of collision here that sticks out. So I like to loop out just a hair on this last one, so I end up right here. And now that we're here, we are approaching the end of this room. So we're going to need a torch, and I'll probably run out of this torch before I get to where I am. So I'm not going to pick it up right now, but at this point, you pick up this torch, and then you'd want to go into the whip pad. Now, I see a lot of people making the mistake of going into the center of the whip pad before they actually press the whip button. But whip pads actually are able to be activated as soon as you step on them. Right on the edge, you're able to activate it. So whenever you use a whip pad, you want to be activating it like right here, not waiting for the center. So just a little tip, and this is the case with pretty much every whip pad in the game. As soon as you run onto them, you're able to use them. Okay. Next, we have the trigger skip. So right in front of Indy right now is a invisible trigger thing that he's supposed to run into that causes 4 enemies to spawn at the end of this room. But we don't want to deal with them at all. So instead of that, we're going to immediately run down left, a little bit back, and then down from where I am, and go around the trigger. So let's do that. And now the enemies aren't there. So where is this trigger? It's roughly about this shape. It ends about at this fence, so only goes until right here. And it's also about halfway through this bridge. And it starts just after the whip panel. So it's like rectangular right here. That's the space you're trying to avoid. Now you have a ton of room down here to avoid it. You don't need to cut it really close and play right next to it, though it is fast to take as good of a line as possible. But if you're worried about accidentally hitting this, you can just go around it. And the reason we don't want these enemies to spawn is because we do have to build something. And building when you have 4 enemies on top of you is basically impossible, which means we have to then kill the 4 enemies, which not only is slow, but it's also inconsistent, since combat in this game has a aspect of RNG involved with how long it takes to kill enemies and whether or not you get random animations to kill them. So it is good to avoid activating these guys. It's a lot more consistent, and it is also a bit faster. But if you do, say, accidentally run into the trigger, which I'll intentionally do here. Actually, let me go get the torch first, since normally you're going to have a torch here. So let's say you have the torch, and you accidentally do this. Uh-oh, they spawned in. So what you want to do, now that we have the torch, because the enemies are here, where we want to trigger this fuse that's right in front of me. You don't always have to do this if we don't trigger the enemies, but we'll get to that in a second. But we have the torch, so that should be our first priority, is hitting this fuse that's right in front of me right here. As soon as we do that, we'll throw the torch at one of these guys, because attacking with a torch is very, very slow, and it doesn't always kill the enemies, and it's terrible. So we don't want to be using that to attack at all. So what we're going to do is we're going to pan the camera to the right, and as soon as this fuse goes off, Indy's going to take out the torch, and we'll press B to throw it at one of these guys. As soon as we throw it, pan camera back to the left, jump back until you're around where the N or the E is in Barnett, and then go back to the right. And the reason we want to do that is because that will bunch all the enemies up right around here, which makes them a lot easier to kill without having to go far out of our way, and will also keep us right around where the torch that we threw was. So I'm going to go ahead and just play that section again so the enemies are in the correct spot while I demonstrate this one more time. Okay, so we pick up the torch and we go across, and let's say we accidentally hit the trigger. So I want to go ahead and throw that, come back over here, and then we have all the guys spawned right around us, punch them, pick up the torch again. Now that's what you want to do if you accidentally hit the trigger. But let's go back to the normal strat. If you don't hit the trigger, which is what you want to be doing, so you go around the trigger, don't spawn in the enemies. Now you have 2 options here. Either you can continue doing that fuse that we were just talking about, trigger that fuse with the torch that we have in our inventory, or we can do a lag jump, but in either case we're trying to get up here. So let's start by showing off the lag jump. If you go around the center of this box and jump over here and alt tab, you can get up here with lag, and that is the fastest way to get up here. But If you don't like that, you can also use the torch, trigger that, wait for that to break, and then standing on the brown piece right here, you can get a jump off and get up here. So those both work. Those are both viable options. But whatever you're more comfortable with, you should go for, because it's only a little bit faster to do the lag. You just have to wait for the fuse to go in. So one more time, this time with the proper fuse on the torch. Since the torch does run out of gas eventually, you only have it for so long. Once you get up here, you push the box just far enough to get past that edge there. You build the bomb, and then you go walk into it so it lights on fire. And now in this moment, we don't actually need the torch anymore, and we have a little bit of time to get rid of it here. So I like to throw the torch, because the torch dropping can sometimes cause some issues later on. I'd rather just get rid of it while I have a second than have to worry about keeping it into the future. I want to talk about this lag jump a little bit more, since I didn't cover it all that much in my first pass through this room. But like I said, the way you want to do this is you want to jump and then Alt-Tab on your way up. It's important that you Alt-Tab before you touch the wall. If you Alt-Tab as you're touching the wall, you're not going to make it up. You need to Alt-Tab before you touch the wall, and that is the case with a lot of these Alt-Tab strats. You want to be doing it before you touch the wall as opposed to when you touch the wall, and that makes it a lot easier to get up. Also on this, if you're right against the wall when you start, it's quite a bit more difficult. Now you can still do it from here, but it's not as easy even if you're Alt-Tabbing early. I find this a lot easier if you start about on this box, Alt-Tab in advance, and then it should work every time. And that's the end of this room. So now we're going to go into room 3. Now that we're here, the first thing we're going to do once again is do a jump roll and cancel the end result of the jump. And now that we're in this room, we only need Indy to beat this room. So there's no 1P2C in this room. As soon as we hit this whip pad, we'll go ahead and whip across, continue on our way. Now, this section here, there's a whole bunch of stuff you're supposed to do, and it takes like a solid 30 seconds, but we're not going to do any of that. There's 2 ways to skip this. I'm only going to be teaching one of them though, because one of them is faster and easier than the other, and I don't really think there's much point in learning the old trick anymore, since the new one is so much easier to learn. But the old method involved breaking that barrel over there so that Marion could get across, and then doing a pretty precise jump off this corner with Marion, but we're not going to be doing that anymore. Instead, we're doing the Indy version of this trick. This is called Generator 2 Skip. Now, what you're going to do is you're going to want to jump around this rock here, since it has sliding collision on it. You want to stay away from this solid rock right here. So if you're avoiding that rock, you want to jump around that, land over here. Now, once you're here, I have a D-pad set up for this that I prefer to use. So it's D-pad right, and then you want to do a well-spaced jump to the right. And if you time it correctly, you'll land on this invisible collision down here on the other side of this kill plane. And then from there, you're able to run to the right. But let's talk about this trick just a little bit more. So there's a couple of things to note about this trick. Like I said, D-pad right makes it way easier, but it still is a little tricky. You need to get a pretty good edge jump in order to make it. As you saw right at the beginning, if you don't jump enough, you're going to bump your head. Like it's pretty visible there that I bump my head right there. And if you bump your head, you don't really gain enough of a jump to easily clear the kill plane. It is still possible to clear the kill plane if you bump your head, but it's a lot easier to do it if you don't. So the important thing here is to really focus on getting this first jump as late as possible, since you want to get a solid edge jump. Like that. And now, once you get the solid edge jump, you also need to space the jump pretty well, but it's pretty easy to space the jump if you get the really solid edge jump. So focus entirely on jumping as late as possible off this edge with Indy. And once you do that, you can land over here. So now that we're down here, this is the invisible collision that we can just run straight to the right. One thing that's important to note is that there is a kill plane like right here, and you don't want to run into that. So steer clear of this edge right here. You want to stay just to the side of that, more like this. So once you land, you want to be going pretty much straight right and just avoid running too close to the edge here because that will kill you. So once you're over here, the next goal is we want to jump onto that rope and then up those bars to get up top. And there is some optimal movement here, so you're going to do a jump roll onto this rope, and then you want to jump and land on this platform here. So you want to jump like that. You do not want to jump like this, because if you jump like this, the next thing you want to do is make it onto the next bar, and you actually can't make it to the next bar from the far left side of this bar. So if you end up landing here, you're going to have to do another jump just to get over here, and then make your way up. However, if you jump off of the rope and steer clear of the bar, and then go up on the right side of the bar, you can go up like that from there. So the intended movement, you do a jump roll over here, stay off, go up like that. That is the intended movement to get up there. So do the movement like that, and that's fast. Once you go in here, this is the cave room, and this is a pretty crazy room because there are so many ways to skip this room, it's not even funny. There's 3 main strategies, but there's a lot of different ways to do each strategy. So we have what's known as Marion Jump, which is the jump that's done over here. We have the corner jump, which is the jump that's done over here. And then we have the pixel jump, which is the jump that's done over here. I'll go ahead and cover the Marion Jump first. Marion Jump has 3 different methods that are done. So the main thing that we're trying to do is jump from this extended platform over here to this part jutting out over here. And the 3 main deaths, the 3 main methods, we have the lag method, the respawn method, and then the no lag, no respawn, just straight Marion Jump method. So the Marion Jump is the fastest possible way to beat this room. The Marion Jump with no lag and no death assistance. And so if you want to try for that, that is the fastest possible way to beat this room. But out of the 8 potential methods you can do between the 3 for Marion Jump, the 3 for corner jump, and the 2 for the pixel jump, 6 of them are within a couple seconds of each other. So there's a lot of options on how to beat this room very quickly. There's a lot of strategies you can utilize. They're all about the same. And the most important thing to note is that missing any of those 6 one time is slower than doing any of the other 5. So consistency is really important, as it's important to be making these first try. So it doesn't really matter if you're doing the fastest possible trick if you're not even getting it every time. So with that in mind, the fastest possible thing you can do is jump with Marion, aim for this corner right here, and try and buffer a jump, and then jump off of that. So we're going to be running off this edge at an upright angle, jumping off of here, right about here, as late as possible, and then landing on this corner and trying to buffer a jump off of that. This is pretty tricky, so we'll see if we're able to do that. Now, I didn't actually get the no death method, but I did demonstrate the death method. So I'll go ahead and talk about that. The death method is very similar to the no death method. It's just that instead of landing on the pixel of collision that you can get a jump off of, you land on the sliding collision, slide into that pixel of collision, which resets your respawn point, and then fall off and die. You get the respawn on the place where you'd otherwise try and jump. And it's actually pretty common to get that method if you're trying to go for the no death method, because they're really close to each other, and a small mistake can result in that. That's also a very common thing that can happen. You get very, very close to getting the jump, but that is the intended no death method. So if you do it like that, that's the fastest possible way to beat the room. But it's only about a second or so faster, the second fastest possible way to beat the room. So if you're struggling to get it just like that, it might not be the best thing for you. Another way of doing this is to jump a little bit further to the right, and you're able to slide up into the collision. But again, because this trick is pretty precise, you need to jump very late, and it's very common to miss it by a frame or so, and then just fall to your death, which is pretty damaging. But regardless, if you are going for the no death method, it's pretty common to barely miss it and then get the death method, which is not a bad backup. It only loses about 4 seconds to get that, which is a lot of time compared to some of these other options, but that is not the end of the world. So that is the death and the no death versions you can both do over here. And then finally, the third method that we can do on this side is the lag method. Now, it's very similar to the no death method. It's just that it uses alt tabs to make it a little bit easier to slide up a bit to the right of where that pixel is. So instead of aiming at here, we're going to aim more over here. And instead of jumping over here, we're going to jump a little closer to the corner here. And while doing this, we're going to alt tab twice once we get to the other side. The first alt tab needs to be a bit before we hit the ground. And the second alt tab is right after we hit the ground. So I'll see if I can demonstrate that right here. That was a little bit too far to the left I landed there. You want to be a little more right than that. Just like that. So by lagging the game just before you hit the ground, you get a little bit of lag as soon as you hit the slope, which pushes you forward. And then the second alt tab ensures that you continue to slide forward onto the solid ground. The second alt tab is not strictly necessary, but it does make it a lot more consistent. I think without that, it's not very much different than doing no lag. But it's very important to time them right. You need to do this first one while you're still in the air. Otherwise, you're not going to get that lag sliding forward on the first one. If you wait until you land on the ground, it's as if you didn't alt tab at all. So that first one being early is very important. And I would say between those three strats, that one is probably the most consistent. It's the one that the most runners do. And depending on how fast your alt tabs are, it only loses about a second to maybe 2 seconds to do the alt tab strat versus the normal no death, no lag strat. So although it is not the fastest possible way to beat this room, it is probably the one the most runners do for that reason. It's pretty meta right now. So those are the three ways of doing Marion Jump. Like I said, the fastest is to do it no death and no lag, and then losing between 1 and 2 seconds depending on your alt tabs is the lag version, and then losing around 4, maybe 3, depending on how long you slide, is the death version. So those are the three options over there. Next, we have the corner jump. Now, the fastest version of the corner jump is about the same speed as the lag version of Marion Jump. It's slightly slower than the fastest Marion Jump, but it's pretty marginal difference. So you want to, if we're doing this room correctly, so you're going to be coming in to the room as Indy. So you'll immediately swap to Marion and then run over here. And you'll want to jump behind these rocks. And now you want to go straight to the right and buffer a jump in midair right along the corner of this pillar. So you notice this pillar is like a rectangle. You want to be landing on the corner closest to the camera. That's what you're aiming for, and you're trying to buffer a jump to jump off of that corner because there's a line of collision there. But it is pretty difficult. Personally, I struggle a bit with this one. I know different people have different levels of success, but that right there is an example of it working. There's 2 different things you can aim for after you get the collision. The fastest thing to do is to land right here on the bar, and if you get a jump really high off the collision, you should be able to land over here. But as long as you get a jump at all, you should be able to make it into the out of bounds collision underneath this cylinder, and then you can just simply jump up and make your way over here. So it's fastest to hit the bar, but it's only about a second slower if you don't quite get enough height and land in the collision under there. So both of those are about the same. It's not that much slower to land in the collision than it is to land on the bar. And because it's not much slower, it doesn't really matter all that much if you miss it. Like I said, it's only about a second slower, but it is really important to actually land the trick, since dying like this loses a lot more time than a second. But if you land the trick like that, that is the optimal way of doing it. That is only about 2 seconds slower than the fastest version of Marion Jump. It's about the same to maybe a second slower than doing Marion Jump with lag. So like I was saying, both of these tricks are pretty close together as far as timing actually goes. You can really choose to do either one depending on what you're more comfortable with. Some people might have a better time with this than they will with Marion Jump. Personally, I think I prefer Marion Jump, but to each their own. Now, if all of the options so far are not what you're liking, there are some easier options. So first, I'm going to cover the VSync off version of corner jump. So for whatever reason, I think it's because higher frame rate is better for buffered jumps. It's a lot easier to get a jump off of this with VSync off. It's pretty straightforward. You can get a jump off that corner just way more often with VSync off. Now, the problem here is that most of the game you do not want VSync off, since a lot of the game is super unstable with VSync off. So you're pretty much just going to be doing this with VSync off and then immediately turning VSync back on right after it if you choose to do it with VSync off, which means that the time it takes to turn VSync off and then back on is basically just dead time that you're losing compared to doing this without turning VSync off. So depending on how fast your alt tabs and menuing is, that might lose anywhere from 3 to 4 seconds versus the normal normal corner jump. So that is a bit of a time sink, but if you're struggling with everything else, getting this first try every time with this VSync off is better than consistently missing any other trick 1 or 2 times, because even if you miss any of these other tricks a single time, that is already slower than doing it with VSync off most of the time, depending on your menuing. Though you do have to actually hit the collision. If you keep missing it like I am here, that is problematic. But in order to hit it a lot often, I find that staying closer to the wall is better. You don't want to stray too far away from the wall because that's how you just completely miss the collision entirely. And even if you don't really hit the part of the collision you want, you should still be able to get a jump off with VSync off. And then make it over here. So you definitely should be noticing that I'm getting this way more often with VSync off. It just makes it a lot easier. It's a lot easier to get a jump off on that corner, and it just makes the trick a little bit easier. But it is, of course, slower to do that, but it's an option if you would like to tackle it like that. Now, that's corner jump out of the way. Those are the 3 ways of doing it: the grabbing the bar, getting under the cylinder, and doing it VSync off. Handled the 3 ways of doing Marion Jump. Last is Pixel Jump. So this is probably the option I'd recommend the least. If you're struggling with other things, I really think the VSync off corner jump is the best easy version of this room, but there is a very easy pixel jump right here, and doing just that skips the whole room. And then all you have to do is build this, wait for Indy to get up here, and then you'll do a quick double tag. And that is not exactly how you're supposed to do that, but during the cutscene, you're supposed to grab the bar, and then you can jump a couple more times, make it all the way to right here during the cutscene, and then jump off. And that is another way of doing the room. Now that is the slowest way to beat the room that is still like a proper skip. That is about 9 seconds slower than any of these other methods we've seen, and it's almost a full 15 seconds, 13, 14 seconds slower than Marion Jump. So it is pretty slow. You can miss any other trick at least once, maybe twice, without doing that, and still be saving time over this method. So definitely not something I would exclusively recommend unless you're really struggling with everything else in this room and you're losing minutes to everything. I would not recommend really going for that because it is quite slow. But there is another kind of hard method over here as well. There's another way of using this pixel to get out of bounds here. So this is a chain of pixels, and you can jump up them and then warp through the ceiling, and then use that to get out of bounds. This is pretty tricky. And then once you do that, you can get a jump off of the collision of the wall. So if you jump like that, like you just saw, get those jumps off of the pixel, get the jump off of the collision of the wall, you can land up here, which is on top of the stalagmite. And then from there, you can jump onto this bar and get over here like normal. So that is pretty hard. And it's also slower than every single corner jump method and every single Marion Jump method. It is just an option for skipping the room, but it's not one I would recommend. I would definitely recommend going for the Marion Jump or the corner jump over either of the 2 pixel jump options, but I wanted to highlight them just as available ways of skipping this room in case everything else was difficult for you. So with that being the case, we will now move on to the next room, the final room of the level. Before we do that, actually, on your screen right now, you'll see a quick graphic of all the different skips in this room and how much they lose or save to Marion Jump. I really want to stress the fact that most of these are only a couple of seconds off of the fastest way of beating this room, and the most important thing here really is consistency. Choose one that you are the best at and stick with it. That is the best way to play this room, since any miss on any of these will result in more time loss than any trick saves over the other ones. And really important to play for consistency in this game when we're talking a matter of seconds. Okay, so now that we're in the last room of the level, we don't have too many more skips here. We have Llama Skip coming up, and basically what we want to do is head over here, jump onto the fence, jump up here, get up top to grab the bazooka. Now that was pretty fast, so let's go ahead and go over that again. This fence right here is what we want to land on, and then we get to jump off of that, turn out a little bit, and then land on top of this wooden piece on top of the elevator, and from there we can jump up here. Now, this only saves 4 seconds over the casual strat. It's not a lot of time save, so you want to make sure you're doing it kind of fast. I like to use this winch right here as a visual cue for when to start jumping. So as I make my way over here, I'll go ahead and just reload the last room so I'm in the correct starting position here. I use that winch as a good visual cue of when to jump. I jump right around here. Then I land on the fence. Do a bit of a turn out and back in to get facing the wooden piece. And then I buffer a jump in midair. So I immediately jump off that when I hit it. And I'm up here to grab the bazooka. So after we grab the bazooka, we're going to want to drop in player 2. And if we're panning the camera up when we do that, he should drop in somewhere around here. And then as we fall down, we should bring both of the two of us over to here. And we have a couple of objectives here. So the main objective to beat the level is to destroy that truck over there. In order to do that, we need to shoot it 3 times with the bazooka. Now, bazooka has 4 shots in it, which means we can also use one of the shots to blow this up. And this is the turnstile that will raise this bridge. So there's 2 different strats here. One of the strats blows this up and uses player 2 to turn the turnstile. The other strat skips this box and also does not call in player 2 and instead does this jump to get over here. But it's a bit of a tricky jump, especially because you can't really do it without a little bit of forward momentum. It's a bit tricky to land. It's a very small position. You have to land on that wooden post, because if you land past that on the side, you will slide off to your death. But I wouldn't really recommend doing the strat that involves the bridge jump. Personally, I don't think it's great. It doesn't actually save any time. These strats are exactly the same because we're bottlenecked by the speed of this truck exploding. The only thing that matters is how fast you shoot the truck, and then you have probably at least 5 or 6 seconds after the second shot lands before the door opens. Because of that bottleneck, it doesn't really matter if you spend the time to put up the bridge, since the way that we're going to shoot this is after jumping up here and grabbing the bazooka, dropping in player 2, we shoot 2 shots at that, 1 shot at this, and then as Indy blows this up, we shoot the last shot at that. And it's really important to delay that last shot, because if we don't do that, the bazooka has a tendency of targeting that white iceberg over there on the right, and we don't want to target that. So delaying that last shot is very important, and aiming it correctly is also very important, since the bazooka only holds 4 shots, and if you run out of bazooka shots, you need to pick up another one over here. That's another reason why I like the don't really like doing the bridge jump, is because sometimes when you shoot a bazooka shot at this truck, it'll deflect the shot right back at you, and you'll get killed by it. And if that happens and you're going for the bridge jump, you have to go run back and get another bazooka up here, as opposed to getting the backup here, because this backup only comes up when you turn the turnstile. So on the off chance that happens, it makes it a lot easier to use the turnstile. Also, the backup here is useful in case you accidentally miss one of your shots. It makes it a lot easier to get the additional shot off, since, like I said, you only have 4 shots in the bazooka. And you will need to land all 4 of those correctly if you're doing the 1P2C strat. So now that we have that all together, let's see that room in action here, the way it's supposed to look. So we come over here and we do our jump to get up top. And we grab that. Indy drops in. 1, 2, 3 shots. Indy builds. And he doesn't actually need to fully build the bridge for the slope to go away. As long as he is pushing the turnstile, that will make the all the slope of the bridge go away. And then you can completely cross the bridge without worrying about it. Now, if we want to look at the 1-player version of that, it looks something like this. Very similar at the beginning. We're doing the exact same movement at the beginning here. But instead of calling in player 2 here, we're just going to not call in player 2. Shoot 1, 2, and 3. And then we get up here, get that jump off, jump over here, wait just the same. So pretty much the only difference is that we don't have to drop out player 2 in the next level, but it's actually useful to start the next level with player 2 dropped in. So because of that, the dropout doesn't really matter. It's more of a matter of preference. Those 2 ways of playing the room are exactly the same. Personally, I prefer the 1P2C method. Struggling with that, you can do the bridge jump method, and that is also viable. But that is the end of this level, and that is the end of this tutorial. I hope this was helpful for breaking down all of the small, minute details of this level.